One of the trickiest things about English pronunciation is that we have only 5 letters, A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, so sometimes 6, to spell our vowel sounds, but we have 15 vowel sounds in English. Not only that, but your native language may only have, for example, E, O, U, and ah, maybe A. A lot of these sounds like ah and eh, you may not even have in your native language. So let's break down the American English vowels for you one by one, really help you build an understanding of what the sound is, how it's spelled, what accent error patterns you might have for it, and how to correct your speech for vowels. Let's take a look at the vowel E. This is called a high front vowel. When I say E, my tongue fills up most of the space in my mouth, and this is a vowel that's in most native languages. The good news is that you might be saying E correctly most of the time when you need to when you're speaking in English. I'll talk about accent error patterns you may have on the vowel in just a moment. Typically, the vowel E we spell with letters EE or EA. Those are the most common spellings. And so I call this vowel the green T vowel. You'll see here that the IPA symbol, or International Phonetic Alphabet, is a lowercase I. That's because in a lot of languages, we spell this E sound with letter I. So that's the first thing to watch out for, that in English, even though in your language E might be spelled this way, in English we typically don't spell it with letter I. That's not one of the common spellings. We usually use 2 letters, EE and EA. For example, we have words like sea or green. We have words like team or clean or read. Sometimes we spell it with just E, like in me and he and she. Usually you're not going to have an issue with pronouncing these words. You're going to be using the correct E sound. The only time that I hear an error on this E in these types of words is if you're saying something, for example, like she lives or we need. Because these short words with just letter E are usually not stressed and they're shorter in duration, sometimes what I'll hear is you using more of the I vowel that's in it and did instead of the E vowel. If we go back to looking at our chart, we can see that the I vowel, the pink pig vowel, is also a high front vowel. So there's not a huge difference between E and I. For I, my tongue is a little lower. It's one of our lax vowels, whereas E is a tense vowel. But the main difference here is that it's going to be a little bit lower tongue, and this might be the vowel that you don't have in your native language, whereas you do have the E vowel. So when I'm saying E, I want to make sure I really have a nice tense high tongue. When I say I want to have a little bit lower and it has that lax sound. We'll talk about I in our next discussion, but while we're talking about E, that's the main error that I hear for the E, either because of how the word is spelled or because we often associate this E sound with being long, and people associate the I sound with being short. It is true that typically if I have words that are otherwise equal, the I will be a little shorter than the E, but it's very important that the main difference really is actually tense versus lax and the position of the vowel, because what will happen is you may end up saying a word like she because it's shorter, a little more like shi instead of she. So I often hear instead of we need, exact same vowel, but shorter duration, longer duration, I'll hear we need, we need. And you really want to be able to still have a full E sound in all of the places where that E is short in duration. So E, while it is a long duration vowel in many words, can also be held for a short time, but the vowel sound doesn't change. The main place that happens is when the E is unstressed at the ends of words. So in a word like city, which has the stress on the I syllable and is unstressed on the E sound, I will often hear city instead of city, city. So I still need to have that same E sound here. I can't let it become the I vowel, even though it's unstressed and shorter. We do spell E with letter Y often at the ends of words. And then we do also sometimes spell the E sound with letter I in words like radio, experience, eents. So often those endings like eents or eent. Again, that's a place where that vowel is shorter in duration, but it still has the tense sound. So main error to watch out for is between the E, as in green tea, and the I, as in pink pig, tense and lax, but both high front vowels. Where you're going to see the error on the E is when it's short in duration because of the stress of the sentence or because of the stress of the word. And the best way to practice for it is really just matching your vowel. So I'm saying, for example, she needs, we need. Something like city, see the city, E, city. You can also find that when you're doing something like a word city, like city or busy, if you practice a lot with the I, D or the IC, for example, being able to move from that lax to that tense can really help you make sure that you're still making the correct vowel at the end. You might need to exaggerate it a little bit. City, really exaggerate and lengthen until you feel comfortable using it. City, city. So that's the main thing that you need to know about the E vowel. You can find common words that it's in and practice materials for that in our Sounds of English course and our other courses online. Go through and get some details on practicing for this E sound. Next, let's move on to the lax I vowel. So vowel I, which I call the pink pig vowel, is a high front lax vowel. My tongue is a little bit lower than it is for the E of green tea, and this is a vowel that often you may not have in your native language. If you do have it, it may be that you have more of a rounded and higher E kind of vowel, and that's not the same. So this I vowel has no lip rounding, and it's not tense like the E. Let's break it down, how it's spelled, accent error patterns to watch out for, etc. So as I mentioned, I call it pink pig because it's typically and most commonly spelled with letter I. So about 95% of the time, if you see letter I and it's the main stressed vowel of the word, it's going to be this I sound. So that's the first thing to watch out for, that you may associate letter I with the E sound, but in English we spell that with EE or EA. So it's in this case not equal. Letter I usually says I rather than E, so watching out for spelling. We do have a few other exceptions to this spelling. So in words like busy or business, we're spelling that with letter U. In the word pretty, we spell it with letter E, so it would be more logical to spell it this way. In the word bin in American English, that's the same as this bin, so I've been taking out the garbage bin. These are really uncommon spellings, as is this one. So the main spelling you need to know about for this vowel is letter I. You really want to see letter I and think I, like in did, big, it, etc. Main error pattern is using the E sound or making the sound too high or too tense. When we look at that vowel quadrangle and we have the high front E and the high front I, there is a space in between. So what will happen is people will tend to do something a little bit in between these two vowels. So you might not be saying eat and deed fully. You might be saying eat and did with not having your tongue low enough. So there is kind of an in between. The vowel sounds exist on a continuum. So really what you want to be doing for this vowel is making a strong separation between eat and it, between deed and did, etc. Especially happens on words like live and leave. And so what I always encourage when you're trying to work on the I vowel is match two words together. So for example, it lives, it did, so that you're hearing No matter whether the word is long or short, you're able to keep that I sound consistent. When the word is longer in something like it did, you might find it easier to do that I sound in the shorter unstressed word, and then you find yourself drifting higher, it did instead of it did. If you can match and really keep your vowel consistent for these two word pairs, that's going to be very helpful in establishing this I sound. It's also important to listen to these high front vowels, to these lax vowels like I, if they're not in your native language. Hearing that distinction between eat and it, trying to imitate it, trying to get that in your brain will help your sound system in your brain start to differentiate that. Another suggestion I have for this I vowel is that you can work on it in conjunction with the next two vowels we're going to talk about, with the A black cat vowel and the red tent vowel. These three, like in bit, bet, and bat, tend to give people a lot of trouble. And so when you work on all of them and you're able to establish that we need to have three placements there, with the I being the highest and the A being the most open, it can really start to help you fill in those gaps. Because right now in your native language, you might have an E and then more of an ah here, and your language might be missing these lax vowels in the front. And so sometimes going from the more open to the more closed, like bat, bet, bit, or the other direction, bit, bet, bat, can be very helpful. So we'll talk about those techniques as we're looking at these lax front vowels, but recognizing the way they're spelled and what biases you may have for those can be extremely helpful. So that's what I would suggest with the I vowel. The other error that I sometimes hear, primarily with Arabic speakers, is that they may go a little too open and use a little bit more of an eh sound instead of an I sound, because Arabic doesn't have this I and they tend to open too much. Most of the errors for I, though, are using the tense E instead. Next, let's talk about the red tent vowel. Looking at vowel as in red tent, we typically spell it with letter E. It's a lax central front vowel. So it lies in between our other two lax vowels. We have I, like in bit, and A, like in bat. Our like in bet, is right in the middle. The front vowels basically have more and more opening with the front of the tongue going down. So between bit, bet, and bat, the tip of my tongue is getting more open. My jaw is also opening, but the back of my tongue is staying fairly high. So for be, bet, it feels pretty flat. The back of my tongue is going to be higher than the front of my tongue. And when I work on the other two front lax vowels, it can be very helpful for the vowel. I call it the red tent vowel because our most typical spelling for the vowel is with letter E. Most of the time when you see letter E by itself, it will say like in get or men. Sometimes it says E like in me, less common though. We do also sometimes spell this vowel with EA, like in head or weather. Those are exceptions though. And most of the time when you see letter E, you should be thinking that lax front vowel. The main error pattern I hear for this vowel is that people will either open too much to the vowel like bat, or the most common is they will use a vowel from their native language, which is a tense vowel. We don't have this vowel by itself in English. We have a diphthong, where we start from this position and slide more closed, as in gray day. In a lot of languages, though, they have just an a pure vowel that is a little more closed than our vowel. If we look at it here on our chart, it looks like this. So you can see it starts a little higher. So where I have the a versus the my tongue is lower on that. This one is tense, and as I said, we don't have it by itself in English. We always slide it into a like gray day or air diphthong. So for the vowel, being able to practice and make a difference between words, for example, like gate, which has the a sound, versus get, which has our vowel that we're trying to get. That can help you feel the difference. A is sliding and tense, gate versus get, These types of contrasts can be helpful, as well as doing contrasts, for example, between bat, more open, front of the tongue down, back of the tongue lifted, bat, and bet, our target here, tongue is more flat, back is still lifted, jaws not as open, bet and bat. As I mentioned in our video for the I sound, like in pink pig, all of these front lax vowels can be helpful to work on together. Many other languages besides English don't have this sound, so you may find it tricky, and you may naturally kind of hear it as the a. Learning that English a that slides in as a diphthong can really help you with the vowel as well. Another strategy that I found helpful for some people is using the schwa vowel, like in some or fun, which is a little bit more flat, more central vowel, because your jaw is about the same amount of open. So if I'm saying get some, or get fun, or fun men, I can feel about the correct amount of tongue placement and openness, just with the having the back of the tongue more lifted and the being more flat. As you work on every vowel that you add helps build your American English vowel sound system. Recognizing the spelling and the errors can be very helpful, and practicing this in context with the other vowels can also be very helpful. Next, let's talk about the black cat vowel, the most open front lax vowel. Vowel our black cat vowel, is a front lax open vowel. And what that means is the front of my tongue is down behind the back of my teeth, the back of my tongue is lifted, and my jaw is fairly open. Cat, bat. It's the most open of the front vowels, and it is typically spelled with letter A, which is why I call it black cat. When we work on it can be helpful to also reference the vowel of red tent and the I vowel, like bat, bet, and bit. It's also useful to know about the vowel, which is an open back vowel. So these are both open. This one's back and this one's front. All that means is that for the front vowel, like hat, the back of my tongue is lifted. Like hot, my whole tongue is down. Let's break down for you, talk about accent error patterns and spelling, and how to correct any of those errors you may have. So the symbol for the black cat vowel is an A and an E smushed together. It is just one sound, even though it may look like two because of how that's written. That's just to distinguish it from the vowel in hot, which has the IPA symbol of this type of A. So this one is a. The good thing to know is that when letter A is by itself in a stressed syllable, the most typical pronunciation for that sound is the a vowel. So we do typically spell it with letter A, like in cat or mad or ask. If you speak another language as your native language, when you see A, you're more likely to think of the vowel, like in father. When we talk about I'll go into more detail of how we spell it, but it's much more typical for us to spell with letter O. We do spell with letter A in a word like father, but almost 95% of the time, when you see letter A by itself, it's going to be this a vowel and not the vowel. So starting to associate letter A with the a sound can be very helpful for pronunciation and understanding in English. The errors we typically have are one, that we're saying the vowel instead of the a vowel. So you might be saying ask instead of ask, or lost instead of last. Fortunately, that's for some words the way it's pronounced in British English, so it won't matter as much for being understood, but it is helpful if you're trying to use the American pronunciation to be consistent and have letter A say the a sound rather than the sound. The other error is often that people will be a little bit too closed, so they won't have the front of the tongue far enough down and the jaw far enough open, and so they're trying to say man, for example, and it'll come out sounding a little more like men. So it's not that you may go fully to that vowel, but as we have seen with our other vowels, when we're looking at the I and ah. There's a range, and you could find yourself somewhere too high, closer to rather than open enough for the ah sound. When I am talking in fluent speech, I'm not opening so far like that, man, but as you're trying to establish this vowel, feeling that ah, ba really does have more jaw opening is very helpful. As I'm speaking, I will still use my tongue to get that opening in the front, back of the tongue lifted, but I don't necessarily open my jaw really far because it would be difficult and slow to open that far. When you're training that sound, use whatever you need to feel the difference between bit, bet, bat. As you're speaking, start to establish and hear that ah sound for bat. So yeah, that's helpful. Also going in the direction of bat, bet, bit, as we've talked about in our previous vowels, really being able to establish those 3 points for those vowels that are lax in the front that you may not have in your native language can be super helpful. Okay, so primarily this one is about recognizing letter A as ah, and then getting the correct placement, that it's front and not back, and that it's open and not mid. Next, let's talk about the diphthong A, that's the last of our front vowels. Looking at the A diphthong in English, it's a front vowel, and diphthong means it's going to be sliding from 2 positions. So it's not 2 different sounds. A is one sound. It's a sound that happens as I move from to the I position, A. Let's look at how we spell it, what accent error patterns to watch out for, and how to correct any errors you may have on this vowel sound. So it's typically spelled, the IPA symbol is these 2 symbols together. We usually spell it with 2 letters, so we call it double A in some cases. We have A and Y, like in day and say. We have A and A plus I, like in rain or aid. Or we have A with an E, silent E at the end, like in name and plate. These E's make the A say its name. Basically, letter A is pronounced as diphthong A, although letter A by itself, as we learned in our black cat, when we talked about the black cat vowel, letter A by itself usually says ah, like in hat. When I add an E at the end to hat, that's when I get hate, the A sound. So when you see 2 vowel letters to make 1 sound, that's a good hint that the A is going to say A, the gray day vowel. The typical errors that I hear on this vowel sound is usually that people will be saying more of a monophthong rather than a diphthong. So your native language might have the sound. And so when you're saying name instead of sliding, name, and holding that a longer time, closing as you're saying it, you might just say nem. That would sound to an American English speaker like you're almost saying nem, like you're saying the vowel. So you're probably not using the vowel when you're trying to say A. The is more open than A, but you may be just saying only part and the start of the American diphthong A. So you might be saying more like de instead of day. Usually it's easier for people to say words that end with A, day, and say, because we can naturally glide. There's more time to close. It's usually these words where the A is followed by a consonant sound where I'll hear this error, that you might be saying more like ed instead of aid, ren instead of rain. So one way to practice is to look at contrast words like ren versus rain. That will also help you get the sound if that's difficult for you versus the A diphthong. That's the one way to practice it. And then I also just suggest in a word like name, first just say it without the consonant. So say nay, drag out and hold that A diphthong, then put your back on. Nay, name. Or you can use 2-word pairs like say my name, save the plate, I hate the rain. You're trying to really match and keep that A sound, the long gliding diphthong, rather than being a short sound or being too open like or too closed. I hope that helps you with this diphthong A and all of our front vowels. Let's just do a quick review. We had the E vowel in green tea, the I vowel in pink pig, the E vowel in red tent, the A vowel in black cat, and the A diphthong in gray day. These are the front vowels for American English. You can get more help and more details on each of these in my videos for those, and in our Sounds of English course, we'll go through in detail how to correct accent error patterns you may have on those sounds, common words they're in, practice materials for you to really solidify those vowel sounds. So I hope you'll check that out. It's our Sounds of English course on speechmodification.com. Thanks so much for being with me today for this vowel lesson for the front vowels of American English.